Welcome to the second, I'm going to stand up. Look at me, I can stand up even. Welcome to the second day of our Vladimir Putin do fuck off. Ukraine can win festival 2024. I hope to God it's the last one. My great friend Caelan Robinson is tweeting some of this stuff. You can follow, if you go to kol.rob or at John Sweeney Raw, you will see the links for the YouTube live streamer. And also, if you can, please donate to the Basket of Seven charities, which what we're doing here is raising money for the festival, and that money goes to all of the money you put into the crowdfunder, all of that goes to a basket of 7 Ukrainian charities, and any profits from the festival, that also goes to Ukrainian charities. So, this hat, somebody has given me this hat, and it stands for Make Ukraine Great Again. How the fuck do we do that? With me, there's a cast of some of the most deplorable people in Ukraine. I'm looking at Gunnar Conroy, Harry from Estonia, Sasha, how do I introduce you? She looks like a sort of Spanish flamenco dancer. What's your surname? Alexandrenko, and she is a brilliant, brilliant fixer, fearless and frightening. James Rushton, brilliant security analyst, writes pieces for The Guardian, The Daily Telegraph, has travelled a lot, especially with Harry, knows the war. Stephen Humphreys are you a professor?
I guess you could say that.
He also is suing Fox News, which is more exciting. Lisa curly hair. Lisa Kozlenko, that I remembered. Yeah. And Oz Chatterjee, whose film, what's it called again?
Battle for Kyiv.
Say again. The Battle for Kyiv. Very good. And that is available where?
It's not available yet. It'll be available before the end of the year. It should be on the internet somewhere. I'll tell you when it's ready.
But is it not, can you get it through by line or?
You will be able to in the future when it's released. It's
right.
Unreleased. We're having our international premiere in 2 weeks' time in Portland, Oregon.
Okay, you should, anyway, good. So that's the gang, and we're going to start a simple question. How do we make Ukraine great again? And I'm going to ask Sasha, because you haven't performed yet. Sasha won a prize for speaking when you were 14. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, no pressure.
Actually, they printed my photo in the local newspaper. It's a great question, actually, about how to make Ukraine great again, but I can feel this kind of negative connotation in it, because we heard this slogan from so many countries and so many, I don't know how to call, leaders, presidents, and we all know how it's ended eventually. So I would formulate this question in other way. In my humble opinion, I think that we need to create new myth for Ukrainians itself, because our cultural self-esteem or self-understanding fucked up. I mean, that's why everything is happening right now, because we never believe something like that could happen to us, because we thought all these things that Russia fed us for so many years. So not only Russia, let's take politics in general. So it created very low esteem situation here. And I believe in order to level up our society, to go from the teenage, okay, fuck off everybody, we want to do like that we saw in 2014. So we need to grow up and to create new myth. Who are Ukrainians? What they want from life, from world, from everything. How do they see their future? what they think about themselves as themselves. And next step, yeah. So only the next step could be something about greatness and something about how to do Ukraine great again, because we should find this greatness inside of us and then do something about it.
In a funny way, I think Ukraine actually is great already. But the neighbours. You're a neighbour, Harry. You're from Estonia. Kind of a neighbour. My geography's crap. So, how would you make Ukraine great again?
Hey everyone, like you said, I think Ukraine is great already. As an Estonian, I know the Russian influence and it's decades of propaganda, everything else. We have the same thing in Estonia. We have Estonian Russians who still support Putin. In 30 years, been out from this influence of Russia, we still see the same people. They still support Russia, they still support Putin. And it's a difficult subject because Russia is using language as a tool. It's always been a tool for them. And integration, it's us Estonians as well. It's always been about our identity, who we are as a nation, as people. And we need to show those pro-Russians that, they're part of us. They need to adapt to our culture. And it's difficult because in Ukraine, it's easier in Estonia because Estonia was always further. Here is the influence of oligarchs for decades. Estonia didn't have that. Estonia is a small country with 1.3 million people. It's much easier to root out this Soviet propaganda and root out all this ideology that Russian empire is great and let's make Russia great again. No, Russia is not great. It's never been great. It's always used its propaganda. That's where they're great. But other than that, there's nothing good in Russia. And we see it here, village after village, city after city is turned into rubble. Russia don't care if it's Russian speakers living in the apartment block. They bomb, destroy everything on their way. And when it comes to make Ukraine great again, at first we have to win the war against Russia. And then we need to work on rebuilding, getting rid of all this Soviet mindset that a lot of people still have. And I think this will come with time, and hopefully time will show, and I'm 100% sure that Ukraine will prevail.
Very good. Jimmy Rushton, military analyst. How would you make Ukraine great again?
I think it's an incredibly nebulous concept, greatness. I think it doesn't really mean anything when Trump says it. I mean, when was America great? Most Americans, especially on the right, would always say America has been great and has been great since 1776. So what does it mean to make America great again? What would you need to do to make America great again? And it's the same concept with Ukraine. What would you need to do to make Ukraine great again? Well, first thing you need to do, as Harry said, you need to win the war. That's the most pressing concern for Ukraine, and it's a matter of existential importance to Ukraine. It's arguably incredibly important for the rest of Europe as well. And I think Europeans generally, some Europeans understand this. Harry's home country, other Baltic states, a lot of countries don't understand it. So how do we make Ukraine great again? Well, firstly, we win the war. Ukraine has to win the war. Secondly, as other people have said, there needs to be a kind of reckoning with the legacy of Russian imperialism. That is already happening. And
Sorry, I'm just playing with my phone. Sorry.
It's okay, John. So, yeah, I think you need to reckon with the legacy of Russian imperialism. And that legacy still exists in the majority of Ukrainian cultural institutions. The military especially, and I see the Ukrainian military struggling to move away from the Soviet model?
I've just was talking to a soldier who's been to Pokrovsk, or actually a journalist who used to be a soldier, and this morning, and he was pretty depressing. What is, for the viewers out there, what is your take, Jimmy, because you go to the front often, how are things doing at the moment? How is the Ukrainian army doing?
Not great at the moment, to be honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and wishful thinking is not analysis. There are systemic problems in the Ukrainian military. There are systemic problems in the Russian military as well. But what we're seeing is we're seeing a lack of training for the Ukrainian soldiers. We're seeing a lack of equipment, and a lot of that is the fault of Western partners, because we have promised to get Ukraine equipment that in many cases has not arrived. We've sent a lot of old equipment to Ukraine. We've inflated the price of that on budgets. When, for example, when the Americans say they send $60 billion worth of equipment to Ukraine, it's nowhere near that. It's a lot of creative accounting that goes on in Washington. They say they send an old M113 armored personnel carrier from the 60s, and they value that at the replacement cost of a brand new military vehicle, right? So it's kind of taking a used car and valuing it at the cost of a brand new state-of-the-art vehicle. And then they say, hey, we sent you, X amount of billions of dollars worth of military equipment, when in reality that hasn't arrived. So the West needs to get far more serious about helping Ukraine, because it's not charity. If Russia manages to succeed here, if they manage to conquer Ukraine, if they can take control of Ukraine's natural resources, its manpower, Russia will be on the border of more NATO states. They will be a society that is entirely focused, geared up around continuous war. And they will not stop. And if Western nations balk at the cost of supporting Ukraine now, they should imagine the cost of supporting, imagine the cost of defense budgets in, a second Cold War. Defense budgets during the first Cold War averaged about 3 to 4%. In the UK, our defense budget was about 5% during the Cold War. So supporting Ukraine now far more generously is a far more cost-effective method of securing our own security, rather than letting Ukraine falter and then having to deal with Russia, again, in control of Ukraine's natural resources, its manpower, and its geography.
Brilliant. Oz Cassidy, we flew in together on Valentine's Day. It was like, but let's not go into. Fuck off. Sorry, that came out wrong. There was a Scouser in the back at the side. And actually, it was one of the most melancholic plane journeys I've ever had. Because we were going into, it felt we're going into war. Peanut, shut up. So that's Peanut the dog, folks. But I suppose, how do we make Ukraine great again? I do feel that, and as actually listening to what Jimmy was saying, I couldn't help but agree that the West we haven't backed Ukraine enough properly, and that's a serious reason why Ukraine isn't as great as it should be. Do you agree?
Sure. So look, I mean, it's probably no surprise to people watching here or listening at home that I am described as a Russia and Iran hawk. And I was a Russia and Iran hawk 10 years ago. If you ask me that we should have massively supported Ukraine in 2014, we should have armed Ukraine properly over that period of time. We should have trained their troops properly over that period of time, rather than the sort of piecemeal, half-hearted, half-assed I trace a lot of the problems that we're having with Russia today down to one particular man and one particular administration, and that's Barack Hussein Obama, who made appeasement the White House's official strategy to deal with Russia. It wasn't about containment, it's about appeasement. The Germans and the EU were roughly running the same program, and that has been a catastrophe for the Western world since Obama's failed appeasement strategies in Syria to do with Russia and Iran. You could add the JCPOA into one of those, to that long list of many things that the Obama administration tried to do. And lest we forget, they tried to do all of this to try and settle down the Middle East. Now we've got the worst Middle East, inter-Middle East state conflict that I've seen in my lifetime. We now have the worst war in Europe since World War II. We have Iran hell-bent on achieving a nuclear weapon and using it to threaten its neighbors. The world is in the worst security. It's worse than the Cold War. We keep making this metaphor and saying, "Oh, we don't want to end up in another Cold War." The Cold War was nothing like this. This is so much worse than the Cold War. We are in much closer proximity to conflict with Russia than we were in Afghanistan. The Cuban Missile Crisis was, a lot of stress and words, but it didn't result in anything. And there was a direct line between the White House and Moscow the entire time. There's no direct line. There's no one talking between Washington and Moscow now. And the nuclear threats coming out of Russia are completely unhinged. I obviously very critical of the Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union weren't threatening to nuke everything every 5 minutes. That's Putin. That's a new thing. We are not in the Cold War. We're in something much, much worse. And I don't think that worrying about ending up in a Cold War is what we should be worrying about. The other thing, the other domino yet to fall is a potential China invasion of Taiwan. Taiwan, not a very big place, but very, very geopolitically important because it manufactures most of the world's advanced chips. So if Taiwan is taken off the map, we end up in a situation where oil and gas is a major problem. Chips, technology for everything from your mobile phone to military defense equipment to hospital equipment, we start struggling with them. Inflation's going to go through the roof. So I think we're in one of the most dangerous period since the end of the Second World War. Why am I giving you all of that doom and gloom? Because there is a way to stop this. There is a way to start rolling back the tide. And the only way to do that is to really commit to Ukraine's defense. I know you'll say, we've given hundreds of billions and blah, 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 blah. We've given things at a very slow rate. The most important factor of all of this war so far and the West's relationship with it has been a term you could call escalation management. The biggest concern of the West is not Ukraine's collapse, it's an escalation with Russia. And no matter what Russia does, it's always on us to start managing that escalation. We need to get out of this mentality. Putin is a bully and he's trying to bully the world, he's trying to bully Ukraine. The only way to go through it is to confront that bully. I'm not saying we should embrace we should get rid of any worry of escalation, quite the opposite. I'm just saying escalation management should not be our priority, because by making escalation management the priority rather than Ukrainian victory, what we're doing is we're handing the impetus to Putin. Putin gets to manage the escalation. We just manage how we react to that escalation. We are in a position where Russia will try and destroy Ukraine. It will try and wipe Ukraine off the map if any major concessions are made by Ukraine. The biggest danger now is a Trump presidency and moving into 2025 trying to create what I would call a Minsk III type situation. Doesn't have to be in Minsk, but the contours of any deal between Russia and Ukraine are effectively the same in that situation. We are saying Ukraine should make territorial concessions for peace. We call it peace, and we've seen the playbook. What will happen is you've just basically greenlit everything Russia's done. You've just given it a stamp of international approval. You've just completely destroyed the post-World War liberal consensus that you can't invade other nations. The UN Charter's in the toilet. Absolutely everything that could go wrong will go wrong if we sign a deal like this with Russia. So, long story short, the easiest way to start rolling back all of this is to start really supporting Ukraine, to start giving Ukraine all of the weapons it needs, not 20 F-16s, 100 F-16s, not 12 Abrams tanks, 300 Abrams tanks. Whatever they need, give it to them. And if it starts reaching the point where we have to start talking about seriously about NATO troop deployments, not necessarily in combat roles, but in roles in the backline, whatever, inside Ukraine, then that is something we shouldn't be afraid of. Because at the end of the day, those troops are going to end up fighting Russia in the future if Ukraine loses this war. And right now, it's not trending in a way that's beneficial for Ukraine. So we need to stop the piecemeal support. We need to turn that support into the same level of support we provided Stalin in World War II. We should be really thinking about this because World War III is really on the cusp, and it's not in our hands. It's in someone else's hands. We need to take back control of that narrative at least.
Good. Lovely. Thank you very much. Woo-woo. Yes.
Can I just make a point? So I totally agree with Oz on we need to support Ukraine to the hilt. I would say I understand the point he's making about being in a more dangerous period than the Cold War. However, I really don't think we should overstate the threat of nuclear war. And the reason why I don't think we should overstate that is because it's been one of the key Russian narratives, right? If you don't let us do what we want to do in Ukraine, we're going to start World War III. And the truth is, Russia is not going to use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine. They were never going to use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine. They've been warned off using a nuclear weapon in Ukraine by their key allies, China and India. And Ukraine is important to them, but it is not important enough to start a nuclear war in which they know that they will die because they understand the principle of mutually assured destruction just as we do. And we, escalation management is, of course, we talk about the escalation managers in Washington. And to be clear, we do need to be clear-eyed about escalation, but that means not doing things like suggesting we're going to strike Russian facilities inside Russia, or that Russia is going to strike NATO facilities inside, say, Poland, in Kyiv Air Base, for example, which some people suggested recently. So let's be completely clear. We're in a dangerous situation, but look back at, say, the Cuban Missile Crisis or Operation Able Archer in 1983, where the world came extremely close to nuclear war. I don't think we're anywhere close to that, and I do think we need to be extremely clear-eyed about it, and we don't want to be inadvertently boosting these fears that Russia is deliberately stroking, that we are close to a nuclear conflict, because we really aren't.
Good. Amen to that. So I want to open this up for questions. Yes, but here's Paul Conroy.
The shortest answer you'll get to this question. 3 things. Allow Ukraine into Europe, full member. Allow Ukraine into NATO, full member. Give them long-range precision missiles with no restrictions, and you'll soon see a greater Ukraine.
Well done, Gunnar Conroy. Stephen, and then Lisa.
Well, very briefly, like Sasha, I'd like to rephrase the question a little bit.
It's a rubbish question.
Yeah, well, here's the question. Let's ignore John for a minute and rephrase the question, how can Ukraine make America great again? Because everybody's talking about making a total commitment to fully arm and support Ukraine. Understand we're on the cusp of America not supporting Ukraine at all. And so all this admonition that you should support Ukraine more is a little bit of could be a moot point. James, in that vein, James mentioned 1776. It's the Ukrainian Jimmy.
James or Jimmy is fine as long as it's not offensive. It's all good. Call me whatever you want.
No, the 1776 line. I'll shut up. I thought you
Thank
were
you.
referring to some American worthy of 1776, but you're actually referring to Jimmy.
Well,
Yeah. Sorry, come on.
okay. He mentioned, yeah, that's moderation for you. Yeah, well, Jimmy mentioned it, and it's really the Ukrainians who are setting the standard of what Thomas Jefferson referred to as pledging their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for their independence, something that Americans are on the verge of forgetting about. So we really have to fight that war in America. It's also an disinformation war. And just to throw out one more can of worms, since Ukraine is setting the standard for, pledging their lives for their independence, what would really make Ukraine great is for Ukraine to take one more step ahead and be the country that sets the standard for fighting corruption, which is really at the bottom of all of the despotism and tyranny and MAGA-ism and everything else that we're fighting. And I won't say any more because that would be a very long discussion, but I just throw that out.
Good. Lisa, I don't know if you wish to, but Lisa and I have just been to see an old friend of ours in hospital. Do you want to tell the viewers about that with all the... Yeah. And also answer the question without being rude to the question master.
Well, make Ukraine great again. We are already great. I'm Ukrainian, and my answer will be very Ukrainian. We were always great, but thanks to our inferiority complex, we did not realize it. We did not want to admit it. And thanks to Russian propaganda, the West did not see it and didn't have the access to this information, how great our country is. And now, thank God, all the foreigners, I work with foreigners, they keep coming to Ukraine and they say, God, life here is so good. And this is, guys, this is just wartime. Imagine how much better life here is without war. So, we are bold, we are crazy, we are ready to pledge our lives, and we'll deal with everything. We just need your help to deal with this fucking neighbor, and we'll deal with the rest, honestly. And we have very clear plan for peace, which is published on President's website, President's office website. There are 10 points, right? Nothing changed, I hope, since then. The world knows what we want, and we keep repeating it at every single summit. As a Ukrainian, what I also want, except for the territories back and the territories of 1991, I want Russia to be demilitarized completely and isolated from the rest of the world. Ukrainian view is that there is no cure for something that is called Russian imperialism. Nobody will manage, nobody will help Russians to open their eyes once Putin dies or once Russia falls. No, it is a disease, and like John said, there is something definitely wrong about Russian society and their brains. John admitted it with time, right? So externally, you know what to do. Internally, I do agree with you, Steve, that we are having huge cleaning up inside, and cleaning up is all about corruption. Unfortunately, every day we have some searches in the officials' homes, houses, and we see a lot of cash. And all the people who are transparent and live according to their values, and like I'm an entrepreneur, I pay taxes, and we all like, okay, what do I need to do to earn this cash in Ukraine legally? And the answer is nothing. You can never have this money. So yes, we have very huge internal battle for honesty, for the law, and against corruption. I really don't know whether we can win it, but it seems like every day we make one step at a time. And I do believe in my country. And some of you know from my social media that I studied abroad. I spent 3 years in the EU, and I came here in 2016 just to live here and to enjoy life here. There was already war in Donbass. And all my family, my relatives said, don't come here because it's dangerous, you will not have good job, good salary. And I said, no, this is my country, and it is great. And I know I'll have everything, and every opportunity will be mine. And I was right. So Ukraine is great. Just help us with this fucking neighbor. Thank you.
Very good. let's open it up for questions. I may have to repeat the question for the listeners, but is anybody, Dima, have you got a question? Not now. Not now. So, so you threw the hand grenade, but you're not going to catch it. Well, actually, Arthur, you're a clever man. Come up with a question.
Okay, well, John, you alluded earlier to the meeting that we had and the chat about the very difficult situation that the Ukrainians find themselves in Pokrovsk and that kind of area. And one of the issues that was there was actually the issue of mobilization. I know it's a sensitive question, but you know we should tackle some of these questions. So I'd be interested to hear from anyone on the panel who wants to talk about that.
So this is the draft. We spoke to a Ukrainian journalist who come back from Pokrovsk, and he said that there were a lot of people who were Ukrainian soldiers who were getting out of the war, who were voting with their feet, who were absconding. And that is becoming a problem. Jimmy?
Yes, it's a really difficult subject to approach as a Westerner living in Ukraine, because you know that you're not going to be the person that's picked up on the streets by the conscription officers. I think the main criticism that is definitely valid of the current government is that they delayed decisions that should have been made. And they, essentially, if you are going to mobilize people, you should do it as soon as possible so you can give these people as much training as possible, because the more training you give a soldier, the better his prospects are on the battlefield. I think, again, it's a very, very difficult situation, because you walk around Kyiv and you see people that, you know, some are clearly military, some are not, some are clearly relatively wealthy. And then you go to other places in Ukraine and you see the, you know, small villages that have 30, 40 pictures of dead soldiers in their town squares with Ukrainian flags flying above them. And you do wonder, again, coming back to the issue of corruption, have people been paying to get out of military service? The answer to that is definitely yes. We know for a fact that there have been people that, you know, the conscription officers have been, in some cases, have been arrested by the Ukrainian SBU and anti-corruption forces for taking bribes to allow people to not do their military service. But again, it's a very difficult question, because as a Westerner, you're in this country and you are very aware that you're not, if you're advocating for Ukrainians to be conscripted, you're not advocating for yourself to go to the front. So it's a conversation Ukrainians need to have, but you know there are no simple answers. But the one absolute statement that I would make, as I said, is that these decisions should have been made earlier, because it would have allowed these drafted men to be given far more training. And again, training is critical to the survival of a soldier, especially in this type of war, which is absolutely brutal. Absolutely brutal.
Sasha, can I ask you?
So you just said you want to talk about mobilization, but which angle do you want to discuss? Because if you're talking about mobilization from the side of the grown-up men, it's one thing, and me as a fixer who goes to the front line very often, and I saw a lot of different situations which impressed me much. I'm talking about, for example, artillery position with no munition at all. So, and here we can talk that mobilization is not the prior problem now within what happened in Ukraine, because at the end of the day, we can find men to fight, but with what? With what purposes? And when we are talking about motivation, we all saw, you know, a great splash of motivated people who want to defend their country at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And with time, with fatigue and all of that, of course, this level went down, but it's not only about that. It's about to fight with what in their arms, to fight which purposes, and I will explain what I mean. Yeah, so just to...
Ukrainians have more tanks and more rockets,
Of course, yeah, yeah.
then people will say, well, okay, I've got a fair chance.
So we never could be equal to Russia. I'm talking about in the way of man, like equality in the man quantity. So we need to have something to show people they could win. And for now, I don't see it. I don't know, do you, guys? And you can feel that on the front line very, very, how to say, precise.
Give us a flavour. When you were last at the front, what was so in terms of artillery, how many Russian shells did you hear coming this way? How many outgoing Russian Ukrainian shells? Give us a flavour.
Okay. So it was a bit more than 24-hour on the position of Ukrainian artillery.
Where roughly?
It was this spring, I believe. Yeah. So, but yeah, situation changes very quickly. But still, if it's not an artillery position, you can see it with infantry, or you can see it with different brigades. And so we were shooted constantly. I couldn't be outside the trenches. And like yeah. So and it was everything. So it was like drones, all this VVP, and like huge, like hard munition, and Ukrainians were just sitting, smoking inside, and I don't know, talking with their wives and telling them, yeah, it's fine, and it was like that. And situation is repeating itself. So okay, in the few months they got munition, but again at the end of the season they are out of it, and they just men with their, like, who needs to fight with bare hands. And in our century, just, I don't know, it's just bullshit. So if you're talking about mobilization, we need to start with purposes and how to say, common sense. Yeah, we never could be equal with Russia, and we can never win. I mean, only with a man resource from Ukrainian side.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to make a quick comment, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
A little bit, and I'll use my loud-ass yank voice. There's also something that when I talk to folks in the West who are confused why Ukrainians aren't deploying men of what most countries would consider are fighting age. In other words, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, that kind of range. If you consider the demographics of the country, it makes much more sense. Because if you look back at the early part of the 21st century, what was happening in Ukraine? The place was chaotic at best. It was a mess. The birth rate was through the basement. They don't have that age demographic. They don't really have that age demographic like you would have in the UK or in Britain. Or, I'm sorry, in the States. So I'm in the light? Go back so I'm in the light. I illuminate myself. I don't need light. I am the light. I bring the light. No, look, I think it is worth considering the fact that the age range that would normally fight a war in Ukraine, that demographic dipped way, way low in the early aughts because people weren't having kids, because there was no stable future to determine. And so there's not a lot of that age group that we would normally send as soldiers to war. So I think when you see like 21-year-olds out on the streets of Kyiv, and yes, obviously the capital being the capital, a lot more wealth, a lot more privilege, all the rest of it. But I think one of the reasons why Westerners get confused about why is your conscription age so bizarre, it's this demographic issue that they have here, and I think that's worth considering.
Good. Okay, one of you two. You, Harry? Yes. Harry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the last question about mobilization. Last year and a half, 2 years, Ukraine has said we don't have issues with manpower. We don't have issues. Only thing we need is weapons. And what we see is there's lack of weapons, ammunition, even basic equipment for a soldier to survive, protective equipment. Guys are going to front without plate carriers, plates, helmets. Why is that? Everyone said, oh, we sent aid package. There was 30,000 helmets sent.
How do you explain? What is a plate carrier? Explain what.
Body armor, pretty much, which protects you from any projectile, bullet, shrapnel.
So most people think the Ukrainians are as well equipped as the British or the American army or the Norwegians or the Estonians. Is that wrong?
It's 100% wrong, because Estonians and Americans and Brits, we're not in a war right now. In a wartime, you lose. The equipment gets damaged. There's new conscripted people coming on. We just had, recently we had a brigade battalion reached out. They said our supply truck got hit. So we lost body armor and helmets. And there's thousands of body armor and helmets for thousands new recruited people. And to get through the bureaucracy and process to get new ones, it's going to take months. But the soldiers don't have months. And when we can come back to the situation when mobilization, yeah, like I agree with Jimmy, it should have done earlier so the soldiers would have proper training, and now we're scrambling. And we're scrambling because of lack of equipment, because we're losing a lot of men. And why we're losing men is because West hasn't supported Ukraine enough. And that's it.
Harry's absolutely right.
Oh, well, sorry.
Let's make one quick one.
Oh,
No, I don't need a microphone.
because the main live stream.
So equipment in a war, armoured vehicles, they're expendables, right? You expend them to achieve your objectives, and you need a constant supply of them. You can't just send, 20 armed personnel carriers for a brigade or whatever, and then think that that's good enough. They get destroyed. We need to be sending constant supplies. Body armour, gas masks is a big thing because they're using a lot of chemical weapons, and we need to be doing it constantly, constant supply.
Okay, Paul.
All right. One of the main things in any conflict that's critical is when you need rotation, and not just rotation to give people a break who've been in a trench for 6 months. What happens on rotation is a unit moves out, and then ordinarily a slice of that unit would be taken and put to the brigade in training, and that experience would be passed on so the recruits hitting the trenches are not going in green without actual battle advice. When you don't have rotation, units get worn down, and then it's very difficult to take people out of that unit to train the next batch up. And that all boils back to the early point James was making about you need to plan your call-ups and your conscription, so you give them people time to train, but also the units on the front come out, and you take a cream of the non-commissioned officers and the experienced people to train the next unit. That's not happening. So you're getting people going to the front without the benefits of the experience of the guys, because they're also on the front.
Okay, wait. If you've got a question, let's have another question.
Yeah. So you think training abroad is a good idea? And if yes, but those trainers, they don't know what is warfare right now, these days.
A certain amount of training abroad is good, obviously basic military skills, but what's going to happen in 10 years when this is over, whenever this is over, is Ukraine will be bringing people here to teach them about trench warfare, because trust me, I was in the British military for 6 years. I was never taught about trench warfare, how to clean trenches. This is a different kind of warfare. And when somebody goes to Belgium or Holland or any of the NATO countries, Poland, to learn to be trained, they're coming back and facing an entirely different kind of war. So yes, it has its place, but the most important people at the moment are the experienced NCOs on the front who can pass the knowledge on.
I'm going to actually add here, we need Ukrainians. We in West need Ukrainians, because after this war, we're going to learn from them. Like Paul said, we need them, and that's why we need to give as much support and keep these guys alive. Because right now we're losing best of the best. And who we have left, God knows.
Okay, so one more question, and then we're going to close this session. And that will be come back in 5 minutes later with a slight rejig. Some of the people who are asking questions from the floor will be here, and then you can throw questions at them, kind of like Ukrainian trenches.
Actually, I would like to ask Harry, as an expert, about these drone jammers. What is this, and FPV kamikaze drones? Can you explain to our viewers?
Definitely not going to call myself an expert, but we've been supplying Ukrainian army the first drone jammer, I think, end of 2022 already. And this is a drone war, and it's all about drones. It's constant innovation. It's a cat and mouse game. Who has different frequencies? Because now we had 6 months ago, we had frequency ranges 600 to 1,000 that Russians used. But now they're using 200, 300. So the drone jammers protect you from the drone attacks. So they cut off the signal between the operator and the drone. And yeah, the game is changing constantly. A lot of these jammers were given out 6 months ago. They're pretty much useless because there were a single frequency, 900, but there's so many frequencies now that you need to have. Sometimes at the front you see cars driving around, they look like, I don't know, Christmas tree. You know, they have so many different antennas for different frequencies. And I think Jimmy can add here a lot. Jimmy did drone training.
So Harry's absolutely right. The majority of electronic warfare systems that are deployed by both sides actually don't provide sufficient protection against FPV drones. FPV drones are absolutely terrifying. And
what is it, so that somebody doesn't understand? What is an FPV drone?
It essentially means first-person view, but generally it's come to refer to a small hobbyist drone which is fitted with an explosive and is flown directly into a target, right? So, and the operator generally wears goggles, but you can also just operate it via a screen, and you fly it kamikaze style into a target and blow it up. And these things, they cost about $300 to $500, dependent on the model, and they are extraordinarily devastating. The majority of casualties on both sides now are caused by FPVs. And what we're also seeing, we're seeing this technology proliferate across the world. Hezbollah are now using FPVs. Syrian regime are using FPVs. Both sides in the Burmese civil war are using FPVs. And I'll tell you what, the British and American military have no idea really how to combat these. A friend of mine is a trainer in the 3rd Assault Brigade, one of the guys I actually did training with, and he's an American veteran. And he told me about the American military training, and it's really farcical. Like, they have no idea of how to defend against the kind of proliferation, saturation of small consumer drones that are in the modern battlefield. One thing I will add as well, in regards to the point about training, the actual kind of tactical operations, Ukraine has a lot of experience on. One thing we really, really need to help them with is kind of modern troop leading procedures like NATO standards. We're seeing the best brigades in Ukraine, so Azov, 3rd Assault Brigade, Khartia, Presidential Brigade, 93rd, the majority of those use NATO standard troop leading procedures and mission tactics style command and control, which is the direct opposite to the ex-Soviet system, which is the majority of brigades in Ukraine still use, which is very much top-down, commander-centric. It doesn't empower subordinates with initiative. It doesn't allow plans to be changed on the fly. And if you look at the brigades in Ukraine which do the best work, which actually have a waiting list to join, right? 3rd Assault Brigade have a long waiting list to join, as do Azov, as do Khartia. They are the brigades which advertise in their recruitment material that we will give you NATO-style training, that we will lead you, with commanders that understand the NATO way of war. So sure, on a tactical level, Ukraine has a lot to teach the West, especially about drone warfare. But the kind of senior NCO training and kind of that sort of training definitely needs to be imported from the West, for sure. And the Ukrainians understand this themselves more than anyone else, I think.
Very good. So listen, we're going to call this session to an end. We're back again in 10 minutes' time. The subject is, who is the Kremlin's most useful idiot? I think maybe some of our American friends will be able to answer that question. Stephen, you're on for that as well. But we're going to have a quick 10-minute break for coffee. Thank you very much to the panel. Let's have a huge round of applause. Woo-woo. Oh, and Vladimir Putin. Do fuck off. Anyway, hello, my name is John Sweeney, or at least I think it is, and and we're organising the Vladimir Putin Do Fuck Off Festival. Actually, we're not just organising it, we're doing it. This is the second day, 2024. If you can, I know times are hard, but if you can donate to our basket of 7 Ukrainian charities, that would be wonderful. And we're doing various things. Paul Nyland, who is on the panel, he runs Lifeline Ukraine, which is it's a version of the Samaritans in Britain, and it helps Ukrainians with heavy psychological problems. And we're also Superhumans, which is a charity that looks after Ukrainians who become disabled because of the war, and it's a basket of other charities. These are good causes. If you donate to the crowdfunder, all of that money will go to the basket of 7 charities. We've been doing this for 3 years. I fucking hope Putin dies soon so I don't have to do it all over again. But this is a battle Putin's not going to win. I'm going to keep on doing this. We're going to keep on doing this until the happy day when we can all say Vladimir Putin has fucked off. So on the panel, Arthur Snell, former British diplomat, Lisa Kozlenko, and Peanut. Next to Peanut, for some reason not on the far right, Kaylin Robinson, brilliant filmmaker whose film about her son is being premiered where?
Here.
Very shortly. What's the film called?
It's called Hunted and Her Son.
Hunted and Her Son. Look out for that, folks. Gunner Conroy, Paul Conroy, formerly Royal Artillery. Let's not get into how you got out. A wonderful photographer and a good man. Sasha Alexandrenko, brilliant fixer. Paul Nyland, previously introduced. Philip Ittner, born in America, has now got British citizenship. So we forgive him a lot. And Stephen Humphreys, an American lawyer, professor, and he's suing Fox News. So the subject of this discussion is who is the Kremlin's best useful idiot? Philip Ittner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many to pick from, isn't there? I mean, obviously, we could go with the various Yanks that have sold their soul to the Kremlin, or Brits for that matter, and the infiltration there. But I suspect that'll be a common topic here. I run a weekly interview program out of Kyiv, and this week I interviewed a representative of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. So I'm going to take that as my pick, because I don't think that'll be covered by the other folks here. So in an effort to not repeat ourselves, the UOC, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, is a wonderful example of the Kremlin's criminalization of religion, of establishing corruption, and making influence for their benefit. There's been a lot of controversy about a recent law that's been adopted which has outlawed the UOC, and in my conversation with the Metropolitan... The UOC is the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. I know this gets tricky because we go into acronyms, because if we don't, we'll be tripling our time here. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church is beholden to the Patriarch in Moscow. They take their orders from Patriarch Kirill, who is a former KGB agent. If there is such thing as a former KGB agent.
Excuse me, he's a man of God.
Oh, notably, of course, with his Lamborghini and his extravagant watches and all the rest of it. Oh, of course he is. Well, what man of God wouldn't? There's been a recent law adopted here to outlaw the UOC, beholden to Moscow. One could obviously ask, well, why did they even continue to operate here? Well, it's because people are very religious in Ukraine. So. In this interview that I had with the Metropolitan, was coming out today, 8 p.m. Kiev time, On the Edge with Philip Ittner, he points out that this is so insidious. What the Russians have done with religion in Ukraine is that this branch of Orthodox Christianity which has still been allowed to operate heretofore. Let's take, for example, one of the faithful, Svetlana. Svetlana has her son, Alexander, on the front lines, and they're in constant communication, or when they can, and Alexander is telling his mother, we're so worried, this is difficult, but we're making it through, but we don't have any shells, and our position is really bad, and then Svetlana, being so deeply concerned about her son, goes to where one would normally go, the house of God, to talk to her priest. Unfortunately, in unburdening her soul to the priest, she says, my son is here, there, and the other place, and this is the situation, not conceptualizing the fact that this priest is going to tell the Kremlin. This is what they've done in Ukraine with religion, and this is why they've passed the new law. So that has been a notable, useful idiot for the Kremlin, is the weaponization of religion. And I could, as is my wont and my usual trait, could babble on for much, much longer. But for brevity's sake, we'll move on.
Lovely. So, Conan Robertson, who is the Kremlin's most useful idiot?
I would say if you could pick one person, it would probably be Tucker Carlson. Even though now he's much less significant, he's on X and he no longer has his show. He was only a year and a half ago the host of he was basically America's most watched presenter. And he managed to actually believe the lies coming out of the Kremlin and repeated them nonstop, genuinely repeated them. He thought that they were true, that Russia was some sort of based, cool country with traditional values. And he repeated that Zelensky, this is again Kremlin lies, was an authoritarian regime ruler. To an audience that, and what he's supposed to believe in, is supposed to be freedom-loving Americans who don't like authoritarian commies, and is basically been convinced by Putin, who's an authoritarian commie, to shill for him endlessly. And the damage that did, still feel it to this day, was massive. And I think that information is even more important than election meddling in a lot of ways, because people vote on what they hear and believe. And if America's most watched television presenter is repeating Kremlin lies because they've been so stupid to be convinced by them, then I think that makes Tucker his most useful idiot.
So, so far, Archbishop Kirill and Tucker Carlson. Did I get his name right? So Stephen Humphreys, Professor Stephen Humphreys, American lawyer suing Fox News. Who, in your view, is the Kremlin's most useful idiot?
There are a lot of candidates I throw out. I'll mention a few of them that other people can take up in more detail if they want to, but let me start with Kaylin's suggestion of Tucker Carlson. One point to make about him is he was really the first person to very audaciously throw out the idea before the American public that America should be supporting Russia and not Ukraine, not just repeating Kremlin talking points and stuff, but that America should support Russia. John touts me as a professor, but actually my main profession is as a criminal investigator. And let me say that I would question Kaylin's notion that Tucker Carlson believes Putin's lies. We're more and more having indictments in the United States of these American presenters being paid by Russian intelligence to repeat these lies. And I say there's not proof right now that Tucker Carlson did that, but that's highly suspicious. Yeah, obviously. And I'm just saying, Tucker Carlson, if you're listening, please come to Kyiv and take part in the next festival. But I would advise you to wear a cheap suit because people might throw tomatoes at you. And I'm just. You do have a right to reply. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. Yeah, I'm just saying the question is out there given the indictments that are coming down more and more, and just how credible is it that Tucker Carlson actually believed the things that he was saying. Let me throw out just a few other people, speaking of information. Elon Musk, who has gone full MAGA madness. And then, of course, I don't know how familiar people are in Ukraine with some of our clown candidates, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tommy Tuberville, who are in the U.S. Congress and very vocal, supporting Kremlin talking points. And let me just put in a little context that, you know, this congressional echo chamber in anti-Ukraine it's gone through several levels. One, the beginning was, why are we sending all that money to Ukraine? We need it here for our schools and fire departments. Why are we sending all that money to Ukraine? Then the next phase was sort of like, actually, Ukraine is a terrible place. Why are we supporting? When I first started coming here to help Ukraine, everybody I talked to supported that, didn't matter if they're Democrat, Republican, whatever. And that changed to Ukraine's a terrible place, you know, and the Zelenskys have yachts that American taxpayers have paid for. And then it's gone really to a third dangerous level, which, again, Tucker Carlson was the first to espouse, which is we really should support Russia because Putin is a good Christian, evangelical, et cetera, and, you know, actually supports our values, and that's coming from Americans, which is a very strange, topsy-turvy thing. Then, of course, you got your obvious choice of Donald Trump, and this is... Well, there'll be plenty more... There'll be plenty more to say about it. Let me just add that Donald Trump has been recruited by the Soviets since 1987, when they've...
You're welcome to take part in the next question.
Yeah, but... Yeah, 1987, Soviets brought him for a, you know, all expense paid, you know, trip where they first, you know, and it's also factual to say, if you're a Russian intelligence agent, you look for somebody who's greedy, somebody's lustful, somebody who's vain and ambitious, and I don't think there's any question that Donald Trump meets all of the Russian intelligence categories, and we know that he will not say anything negative about Putin, and in fact called him a genius for invading Ukraine, said, you know, Putin can do anything he wants to NATO countries, etc. But since it's in my theme, I think, and hearkening back to Tucker Carlson, the most damaging, useful idiot, although I think he considers himself Putin's superior, actually, is Rupert Murdoch, who did more than anybody to create this disinformation chamber in the United States and repeats, you know, constant barrage of lies that have really, you know, moved the public opinion in the United States, which I said when I first started coming here, everybody in the United States, almost without exception, supported Ukraine, you know, Russia invading, terrible thing. Now that's become a very divisive thing, very divisive about whether to support Ukraine at all. Donald Trump is kind of backing off of it now that he's trying to get reelected because it's not very popular, but he's said many times he would yank the support for Ukraine. And he actually did succeed in yanking the support for Ukraine in December of 2023 when he told his congressional Republican allies to not allow a vote on, that's how they stop the aid, is by preventing a vote, because the Republican Party is a good candidate in its entirety because it's gone from a national security hawk policy to
So Paul Conroy said, save some for us, please.
Well, there's plenty more to say about all these, but let me just conclude by saying, you know, that you know, I think that the damage that Fox News has done is created the landscape for all these other things to happen, and that's why I'm proud to say I am hoping to sue Fox News out of existence.
As a former employee of said network, I fully, wholeheartedly support that.
Arthur Snell, the former High Commissioner to Trinidad and Tobago, and other things. How about some Brits who may be the Kremlin's most useful idiot, or maybe some Americans? Arthur, over to you.
Thank you, John. Let's do some Brits. There's so many to choose from. I guess a bit like Stephen, we could go through a bit of a list. Happily, this is a kind of equal opportunities operation. So we've got people on the right of British politics, people like Aaron Banks, who took Russian money to get Brexit done. I'm sure. Do you want to give him his right of reply? Yes, Aaron, please come to the. All right. Yes, Aaron, come to the festival. We know that they gave you a diamond mine. Right. Okay.
But he would deny that the diamond mine was owned by Russian money.
Well, he had lots of meetings at the Russian embassy at which they discussed opportunities in diamond mining.
But he would say that he never took any Russian money.
He would say that, yes. So that is what Aaron would say, and if only Aaron were here, he could say it right now. And then, but on the left, we had Jeremy Corbyn, who after the attempted assassination in Salisbury of Sergei Skripal, who of course was a resettled Russian defector, Jeremy Corbyn's big idea was that we should get Russia to come and investigate, because that would be great. And Jeremy Corbyn speculated that maybe it was, I don't know, MI6 had done it or something. So, we had lots of idiots. But I think what we want to do, because we obviously I don't have time to list all the idiots, is let's get an archetype. So here's a certain type of Briton. Let's call him Rupert. Now, Rupert he's just turned 50. He's very posh, is Rupert. He's not very bright, though. He went to a private school, and his dad was a banker. And his dad, Rupert's dad, went to Cambridge University, but Rupert wasn't smart enough, even though he went to a private school. So when Rupert left his slightly second-rate university, he couldn't get a job as a banker. But Rupert had friends, and Rupert's friends got him a job in public relations. And not long after Rupert had been working in public relations, a big Russian oligarch came along and said, we don't like it when people around the world publish truth about us. So we want you to help us manage our reputation. And the great thing, Rupert's quite thick, but he knows who to call, he knows which lawyers to call, and he knows who to hire so you can have researchers and investigators. So if someone writes a true story about a Russian oligarch who's in bed with the Kremlin and organized crime on a small website many thousands of miles from London, you can still sue them in a London court and come up with some kind of bullshit libel tourism reason. And that means that the Russian oligarch can enjoy his life in London, and his wife can enjoy the nice lunches, and the kids can go, actually, as it happens, coincidentally, to the same private school that Rupert attended. So there are a lot of Ruperts in Britain. Britain has thousands of these people, and they have for years made life very comfortable and enjoyable for Russia's oligarchs. And they are, I think, one of Britain's finest achievements of our recent years. So those are our useful idiots.
Yeah, here. Who is the most useful idiot, right?
Yes.
Okay, my opinion will be, again, Ukrainian, right, Peanut? Everyone whom you named here, they are not idiots, in my opinion. They know what they do, and they all benefit from the scheme. Who real idiots are those who were born in Russia and still live in Russia and love their president and worship their president. Simple people, simple civilians of Russia. Unfortunately, there are so many of them that I cannot name my favorite one in that population. And this is so sad. This is.
What you do is you name them and then you invite them to the festival.
Okay. Oh, by the way, a quick announcement. Trump, come to the festival and I'll fix your second ear, okay? Personally. So this is very sad. Like I said, Ukrainians who don't believe they will change, and they are real idiots because they truly believe that their country is great and mighty and huge empire, and that grabbing other territories is something normal, and that raping and killing kids and women is something normal. So they are not only idiots, they're also idiotic killing machines, which is very scary, and the West has to do something about them. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
A very small addition.
Yes.
I would, just because I completely agree with Lisa, I want to add that not only ordinary Russian civilian population, but I would add to this list Russian liberalists who claim themselves as fighters for democracy and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, they're just scared small people who create this image of victims of the regime and made people believe that it's only Putin's fault. It's only one person who are in charge of everything and who have created all the situation. So I think they are idiots and they are used with their government and they are not fighters, unfortunately, for Ukrainians and for all of the Europe. Thank you.
So at the next festival, let's be clear, we're inviting Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump, Rupert, and the entire Liberal opposition. You're welcome. Gather Colroy.
Right. I'd like to nominate a category, a behind-the-scenes folk, really, and that is all of the writers, producers, directors who worked on the escalating management drama, because they are the people who have actually caused the most deaths on the ground. Escalation management has been a part of American policy that has had direct effect on the ground, and the continuing fear of escalation management is hog-tying Ukrainian efforts to defend their cities, to defend their civilians, and they should be. If Jake Sullivan wants to come up and accept the award on behalf of the whole team, that'd be much appreciated.
Jake Sullivan, you're invited to the next Vladimir Putin Do Fuck Off festival. Though, Phil, you had a line about this, so it's your joke. You remember? No. Okay. I think you... No, it was you. It was you. It was Ken. It was Ken said... Oh, Ken, do you want to... you should say it to the... it's Dan! I keep on calling you... I'm terribly sorry. I've got early onset Alzheimer's. Dan, tell the audience, tell the world what you would like to say to Jake Sullivan.
Jake Sullivan, please do fuck off.
There we go. Jake Sullivan, you're invited to the next festival. Paul Nyland, by the way, I think of some questions. Everybody's spoken apart from Paul, is that right? Yeah, good. Paul, have you got a suggestion? No, you've done your suggestion. Paul, who is the Kremlin's most useful idiot?
So I'm actually going to adjust my answer slightly because I was actually just going to say Donald Trump. But in actual fact, and I'll go with Paul and nominate a category, the most useful idiot is the most strongest, most powerful person in the world. And we can go back. Oh, and I recently saw an interview between Barack Obama and Christiane Amanpour on CNN, and they were talking about mistakes in 2014. And Obama was specifically asked about Crimea. And do you know what he said? He said, it's complicated because there's a lot of Russian speakers there. And I listened to that, and this is like 6 months ago. I listened to that, and I'm like, that is the most powerful person in the world repeating Russian bullshit propaganda. And Christiane Amanpour did not push back against it. And the bigger crime, arguably, for me, in my mind, from 2014, yes, there was the theft of Crimea, but it was the beginning by Russia of the land war, the hot war in the Donbass, which has killed thousands of people, and that doesn't get a mention. And so the current occupant of the White House, the most powerful man on earth, keeps Jake Sullivan on board. Why? Why? And then we get on to Donald Trump. And with Donald Trump, here's the thing. I was watching an interview with Tim Snyder, Professor Tim Snyder of Yale University, about 2 weeks ago. And Snyder openly stated, and this is not a secret, we all know this, that the Russian holy, or Hail Mary, their final prayer, their final wish to be able to secure some kind of victory in Ukraine is that Donald Trump is re-elected. And we're all openly having that conversation that the Kremlin wants Donald Trump to be the president of the United States, and we're not fucking horrified by that. It's astonishing. Writers such as Anne Applebaum and many others have all commented on this. It's all public knowledge, and yet it's still a very real possibility. So the most powerful man in the world is the most useful idiot for the Kremlin.
Can I just a little bit about what Paul said and Crimea and Obama? It was a couple of weeks before when they used the chemical weapons in Ghouta in Syria. And the then Obama White House looked at it, and they'd already drawn red lines in the sand. And when the death toll in Syria had reached 500,000 people, 12 million people displaced, and then they used chemical weapons, he backed down from that red line. It was quite a public back down, and the British failed to act as well after a vote in Parliament. 3 weeks after that, Russia went into Crimea. And you have to think that the assessment back in the Kremlin was 12.5 million people displaced, 500,000 people dead, another million injured, and they've done nothing. Are they really going to step in and object to us taking the Crimea? And the Kremlin called it right. They stepped in. There were a few voices raised in objection. No one did anything. But they were emboldened by a lack of action after watching 500,000 people die on the battlefield in Syria.
It was actually, very good observation, but it was actually Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, who tabled a motion that Britain shouldn't react to the use of chemical weapons by Bashar al-Assad. And that went, I think, to a free vote. And Parliament, the British Parliament, voted in favour of Ed Miliband's motion when he was leader of the Labour Party, and the White House followed the British. So I'd invite all the MPs who voted against standing up to Bashar al-Assad to come to the next festival, Ed Miliband. And
Alistair Burke doesn't have to come because he voted for.
Alistair Burke was, who was he? He's the
Minister for the Foreign Affairs.
He was a Tory. He's a good guy, yeah. And by the way, this crosses both sides. My own nomination, I'm with Stephen, Donald Trump. What a cunt. Sorry, I should make myself. I've written 16 books, and the best I can do in terms of describing Donald Trump is what a cunt. Yeah, I'll suggest it to my agent in the morning, Gunnar Conroy. But he is, just please have a look at the photographs of Putin and Donald Trump at Helsinki, where they met for the first time. And what happens is that Trump looks broken and crestfallen, and this was a private meeting. There were no Americans there whatsoever. This is unprecedented. There is only Trump and Putin and Lavrov and a Russian cameraman and a Russian translator translating into English. No American officials whatsoever. And frankly, they look like a blackmailer, Putin, and the blackmail victim, Donald Trump.
Just in the pictures.
Yeah, if you just look at the pictures. And if you want to know more about this, there's a book. It's actually quite good. It's called Killer in the Kremlin. But my Alzheimer's has made me forget who wrote the fucking...
Mad old cunt.
Yeah, some mad old cunt called John Sweeney. Thank you. That's me. But actually, adopting the former British ambassador, the former High Commissioner to Trinidad and Tobago, I'd also look at a group, and this is the people who manage for a nice 10% or more Russia's dark money. So these are bankers and lawyers, rather too many in my home city in London, who are helping to look after Russian oligarchs, to look after Russian oil and gas deals, PR men who try and go smooth, the Russians aren't as bad, they have their own narrative, who sort of slice up the horrors that we see here and then somehow make money out of that. So these are the agents in the West for Russia's dark money, and you're all fucking invited to the next festival. Right, we've got two entirely new people in the audience. That's wonderful. Have you got a question? Hold on, have the doodah.
No, I just wanted to say that I would like to hear more opinions, but to, I don't know, maybe have some sort of question. Oh, why don't Elon Musk? No, that's not interesting. But okay, what do you think about Elon Musk? I guess, like, is he? Yes. Okay, like, what do you think of him?
Yeah, so, what do we think about Elon Musk? He's a cunt. But oh, no, but hold on. In a more considered way, Phil.
You want me to do it? Yeah. Well, dodgy, clearly. I mean, anybody who's been on, I mean, he spent, what, 44 billion, was it, for Twitter, now X, which he's clearly using as a means of propaganda to support Trump and to, I mean, he downplays anything Ukrainian. The algorithm is clearly targeted at underplaying Ukrainian or pro-Ukrainian voices. The man speaks fluent Russian. Yes, he does. Does he? Yes, he does. Yep, he's a fluent Russian speaker. And he goes to Russia quite often, actually. There's a lot of suspicion that many of the elements that he uses in his either what's that awful car? Tesla. In his Tesla. Or even what he's done with Starlink.
The Tesla is invited to the next festival.
Yeah. Or even what he's done with Starlink. Now, I mean, originally, when he provided Starlink, everybody went, great, wonderful, useful on the front lines here in Ukraine. But he's used that as a weapon. And he runs hot and cold with it. We know he's giving them to Russians as well now. So he's pretty much openly saying, I think there was a drone shot down 2 weeks ago, roughly, which had Starlink elements in it that allowed them to target Ukrainians. Elon Musk, I don't know, he's like a fellow traveler with the Russians. I just think he's totally utilitarian. Whatever is going to make him rich and famous and an influencer on the global stage.
Hey, that's unfair on utilitarians.
I'll tell him when Elon Musk, you're invited to the next festival, if I may, and we can discuss it. No, he's. I think he has a strong authoritarian streak in him. So there's that too. But the man, we have given the world's largest telecommunication, information, social networking platform in the world to a man who clearly doesn't have any desire to see liberal democracy spread, and he's clearly in alignment with Putin. He's a threat to democracy. He's a god-awful human being whose family made their money on the backs of apartheid and diamond and emerald, precious gem mining in Africa. Also, if you do just do if his algorithm will let it happen, and you do a proper research on this man's background, he's a deeply dysfunctional human being, which again plays to what you were mentioning, is that Russian intelligence looks for people who are broken. Yep. They look for people who are not... Excuse me, Russian intelligence are all invited. No, they're not. No, that's one line too far. No, we don't need that. Okay, stop. KGB, fuck off. There's something deeply wrong with him. He's I don't know whether, and this is no affront to the people who are on the spectrum, as it's called, but he's clearly on the spectrum. And his family history is deeply disturbing, deeply racist, deeply authoritarian, connected with, again, the apartheid regime in South Africa. This is not a man who supports liberal democracy, and to give him the power of buying Twitter and having that undue influence is, I think, was a grave mistake and should have been obstructed. No, he's a threat. He's a threat to all of us on the planet, because anybody who sides with Putin is a threat on the planet. So, anybody else?
Yeah. Yes, it was a very good question, actually, and it is thought-provoking. But on top of what Phil has just said, the other thing about Musk is that he's a carpetbagger. You know, he didn't invent Tesla. He came in and took over the company. It had already been started. The same is true as well with his involvement in PayPal. He wasn't the founder of it. It wasn't his idea. He came in later on and cashed out with billions. But I wrote an article. In actual fact, when I submitted this article to Peter, to my editor at Byline Times, the next day, Prigozhin went on his march to Moscow, and so it was like, okay, hold that, right? And so the article was about the thing that all of the the people who talk down Ukraine, these useful idiots, the thing that they all have in common, right? Okay, so if they're anti-Ukraine, then they also believe a lot of other bullshit too. They are already, dipping their toes in with conspiracy theories. And so when Peter came back to me after Prigozhin's march to Moscow had ended, he says, can you find a more up-to-date example of what you're talking about? And I said, sure, I see it every single day. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the woman who believes that Jewish space lasers are causing forest fires in California, is also a big anti-Ukraine hate, a person as well. Lady, Marjorie Taylor Greene, please come to the next Vladimir Putin do fuck off festival. So there's all of that, and he's very much a conspiracy theorist. And then the other thing about him, the final thing about him, is that he's just a narcissist. And the most common photograph that was shared on Twitter yesterday is him on stage with Trump jumping around like a fucking moron. He's a fucking moron, but he's getting attention. Like when he sat there and the advertising boycott began. And somebody asked him about it. What are you going to do about that? And he says they can go and fuck themselves, right? I mean, it's not about the company. It's not about the bottom line. It paid $44 billion. It's worth $8 billion now. But he's a narcissist. And owning that platform feeds his need for attention.
Any more? Dima, you're brilliant at asking questions. Is anybody else who's got a question? Aha. Yeah, okay. And also our Spanish friend.
Thank you. Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. You were talking about useful idiots. My question was, what do you think about Boris Johnson, who is literally, he's going for Trump full on. So what do you think about that? He was given honorary citizenship in Kyiv, right, by President Zelensky, and now he roots for Trump. What do you think about that?
I think he's a useless idiot.
Don't go, you're not allowed to leave. The worst pastry I've ever had in my life is a Boris Johnson pastry in Savitilo.
I've just got a Boris Johnson story.
Yeah, and I did try to go to Russia at the end of August, to Kursk. And we were in with my great friend Brent, who I think lots of people here know. Brent loves old cars, and he described himself as a gigolo and a gigoli. And and basically, the Ukrainian, because the Americans are scared of the international media going to Kursk, the Americans had told the Ukrainians, stop the international media, stop us from going to see what's happening in Kursk. And so we're trying to get through 4 checkpoints manned by the Ukrainians who were stopping international journalists. And of course, we passed a team who were in a fancy G Mercedes, and they were stopped. And they had all their press stuff and all of that. And we were 2 old guys in a 50-year-old fucking Zhiguli, and the Ukrainians just left us fly through. Yeah, you can go. You're old people. You're rubbish. And that was cool until we got to the 4th checkpoint where they said, fuck off and go home. And we kind of wanted to go, we could work out a way of getting around the checkpoint, but then there was this fields with tape on it and all that stuff. And that says minefield for people who don't have enough money to pay for the minefield signs, so we didn't go. We picked up Mum and Dad. Thank God you've come back. We picked up Grandpa and Grandma, and Brent said, hello, I'm Brent, I'm American. Thanks very much to the United States. And I said, I'm British. And Grandpa says, I love Boris Johnson. And I kind of wanted to be sick. So with Kaylin, I've made a film about Boris Johnson and his relationship with the Lebedevs. And the Lebedevs, as Arthur said yesterday, are a KGB dynasty. And the problem is not Yevgeny Lebedev, who is Baron Siberia. The big problem is his father. His father was Alexander Lebedev, and he was the KGB agent in London from 88 to 92. And Vladimir Putin himself has said, you cannot leave the Russian special services, ever. And by the way, he stands by this because he kills people who were in the special services and try and leave. Litvinenko was poisoned with polonium-210. Skripal, who was in the GRU, was poisoned with Novichok. That's what happens to people who leave. So the question is Alexander Lebedev, the father of Baron Siberia, working for the Russians, or is he an independent person? The answer is he is a creature of the Kremlin. So when Boris Johnson, as Foreign Secretary, goes to the Lebedev's Palazzo Terranova, where I've been, which is in our film that Kaylin and I have made, you have to worry that Boris Johnson was horribly indiscreet. Horribly indiscreet. And that but the story gets worse. It's possible that there may have been some other thing going on, some financial relationship, who knows? The Lebedevs, father and son, are invited to the next festival, as is, actually, I'm not inviting the KGB. But there's a big, big issue there. What Boris does symbolically... Is Boris invited to the next festival? Yes. Yeah. Boris, you're invited to the next festival, but only to answer the question, have you ever received any money from the Lebedevs? Or presents or gifts in kind? And I believe that's a harder question for him to answer. But Boris and the Lebedevs, you are invited. So, but Arthur, you know a bit about this. We should stop in 5 minutes. It's a good old question. So why Ukrainians like Boris Johnson? Because at the right moment, Boris smelt the mood, and he's a brave man physically. I've seen him in Sarajevo, no doubting about that. And he said, right, I'm going for it. Is it possible that he has benefited from money or gifts in kind from the Lebedevs? Yes, it is very possible. Boris, you can reply to that if you so wish. But it's also possible that having received gifts in kind from pro-Kremlin oligarch Alexander Lebedev and the family, his son, he then decided to fuck the Russians because he's absolutely immoral. So he switched amoral, no morality. So he takes money, maybe not from, let's say, from the Ruperts, as Arthur was explaining earlier, and then having taken money from Russian actors or cutouts for Russian money, he then says, well, fuck them, I'm going to help Ukraine. But now he's advocating that Trump should be the next president. And then we all know that Trump is the Kremlin's greatest useful idiot. So no, it's it would be if Boris Johnson was in receipt of long-term Russian money or aid or whatever, this would be entirely the smart thing to do. He goes with Ukraine when it's politically clever to do so, and now, fuck Ukraine. Arthur.
I don't think there's a lot I can add in terms of what John has said there about what Boris might be doing now, but it is worth looking back. Before the Ukraine war, when he was mayor of London, he loved Russia. He had all kinds of festivals and celebrations of Russians in London, and that was all about Russian big dirty money, oligarch money. It's not the Lebedevs are very important in this story, but there are other Russian deep money resources. He himself went to Moscow, and of course we've talked about this thing of compromat in relation to Donald Trump. Well, Boris Johnson is also well known for his inability to keep his trousers done up, and so it's impossible that they didn't try to gather some kind of compromising material on him. So I think you have to assume that the Boris Johnson relationship with Russia it goes back several years and is not something that happened just when he was in the Foreign Secretary and then Prime Minister.
Lovely. Right. Can you? Thank you so much. So, there's one question. Yes.
You partially answered it already. I was going through a different angle. Arthur mentioned that Brexit was partially or largely funded by Russian money. And the two biggest, most exposed public figures from Brexit were Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson. I mean, at that time, were they useful idiots or were they Russian assets pushing the Russian agenda? Because I think that Brexit was the most successful Russian operation to break out the European Union to date. So were they doing it as a Russian assets or just useful idiots?
Nigel Farage and Aaron Banks, welcome to the festival next year. So I did 7 episodes or 7 stories for BBC Newsnight about this, and I once met somebody who said actually one of the reasons why I kind of crashed out the BBC in 2019 was that the Russians didn't like the stuff I'd been reporting on Aaron Banks, and they went for you. Maybe, who knows? What I do know is that Aaron Banks had a Russian-born wife. I also know that Aaron Banks gave, he said, Britain's biggest political donation ever to Nigel Farage's Leave.eu, if I'm getting it right. The National Crime Agency and then the Electoral Commission and then the National Crime Agency both separately investigate this donation and say there was nothing wrong about it. Although the actual homework for this explanation the public has never seen. But my good friend Christopher Steele, who is invited to this festival next year, but not like the other people, however. Christopher Steele, the former head of the Russia House at MI6, said neither the National Crime Agency or the Electoral Commission have the chops, the power, the muscle, the people, the intelligence capability to answer these questions properly. The people who do are, what's our GCHQ called these days? Is that the National Security Agency or is it still GCHQ? GCHQ and MI6 and MI5 are the people who can properly answer these questions, but nobody's asked them. Shame on the Conservative government from before for sitting on the Intelligence Committee report, and we can't read half of it. But shame now on, and also for not doing a proper investigation into Brexit, and shame also on the Labour government, the new Labour government in Britain, because they're not investigating this. I think all of us believe that Brexit is a massive Russian gain, and all of us suspect that dark Russian money helped pay for Brexit. Aaron Banks, Nigel Farage, everybody else, you're all welcome next year. Listen, need to have a break. Let's all have a little drink for 10 minutes, and then we're back here for the final session, which is question time. And the questions will come from the audience. So let's give them a round of applause. And a huge round of applause to everybody in the panel. Remember, if you can, please donate to the crowdfunder. Everybody here has given up their time for free. So if you can, if you want to piss off Vladimir Putin and all the other people we've identified today, please donate. Cheers. Good. Let's go. We can have a drink now. Are we ready? Hold on, I'll stand up. Oh, fuck. I'll fucking stand up. There we go. Fuck off. Hello. Presenting, how do you do it? So, welcome back to the Vladimir Putin Do Fuck Off Festival 2024. On the far left, but not in reality because he's a good Liberal Democrat, is Arthur Snell. Can I tell the world that? Yes. Next is Lisa curly hair and her dog Peanut wearing a Harry Potter invisibility cloak. And next to them is Harry from Estonia, Gunnar Conroy, wonderful photographer, Sasha Alexandrenko, more or less, professor but also former criminal, you're a criminal lawyer, Stephen Humphreys, and Philip Ittner, born in America, but he's now a British subject. That, folks, is evolution. And my name's John Sweeney, and if you can, times are hard, I know, but if you can chuck some money on our crowdfunder, that would be wonderful. If you don't like Vladimir Putin, you feel irritated, please come to the festival here in Kyiv next year. And if you can't come to the festival, what you can do is donate to our crowdfunder, 7 Ukrainian charities. That would be wonderful. So this is open season question time. But first, we have a license plate. Harry. Yes, they can ask questions on Twitter, but I have to stop talking when I do this. But first of all, one of you come up with a question when I tweet that thing. Harry, we have a license plate.
Yes, we have a license plate for you from Kursk, because we all know how much you want to do Kursk tours in the future, so this number plate will be excellent for your van.
So I was, I'm actually, this is going in my house, it's a souvenir. It's rather good. Woo, 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 woo. Come on, join us. And more punters. It's always lovely to see. So I'm going to auction this, but it's a Roman Abramovich style auction. Well, I control it completely, and I've just bid for it, and I've just won the auction. Isn't that sweet? But I will genuinely put some money in our crowdfunder for this wonderful thing. I'm going to stick it on my house. The point is, 46 is for the Kursk Oblast. So this is from Russia with love. Spasiba Bolshoi. So, please ask some questions for the panel. These are some of the finest minds in the world. Correction, some of the finest minds available on a rainy Sunday afternoon in this part of Kyiv. Have you got a question? You're newcomers.
If you will get us into some context what's going on here.
If you get us into what, sorry?
If you'll get us some context of what's going on.
Oh, so this is the Vladimir Putin Do Fuck Off Festival. And what we do is we tell Vladimir Putin every now and let's do it right now. We have a simple message for Vladimir Putin. It goes like this. Vladimir Putin. Do fuck off. And it's not a cult, though it sounds like it. And so what we're doing is live streaming to every...
Don't have sex with John. It's not part of the deal.
You're Anyway, sorry, there's a difference between cult and cunt, but never mind. Anyway, yeah, so basically we're all we've been to the war, we've seen the war, and we all believe that we should do more to help Ukraine. And we're deeply frustrated with the governments in the West for not doing enough. They've done something, great, it's not enough. So that's why we're here. Let's have a question, and then I can tweet. Has anybody got any questions for the panel? Anybody got a question? Yes.
What is the best thesis that we as Ukrainians, like as Ukrainian civilian, can tell to like European civilian for him to support Ukraine more? Like, what is the best from your experience as being like from Western countries? What is the thesis that works the best? The message.
Okay, the message.
If the message is the best, if we just calmly speak, I don't know,
Sure. So the question, if we didn't hear it, is what is the best possible message for people in the West, not just Europeans, but Americans and everybody else, so that those people outside Ukraine can help Ukraine the most? Gunnar Conroy.
It's quite simple, really. If you're talking to a Westerner and you're trying to convince them that you need assistance, is to point out quite simply, you are no different than them, and they are no different than you. Your circumstances are incredibly difficult, but you deserve no less help than people who undergo a natural disaster or any form of harm in the so-called West. Forget the boundary lines, forget them. You know, you are people who are facing an existential threat and should be treated in the same way as anyone from one of our countries, which is why I said earlier that Ukraine should be part of NATO, Ukraine should be part of Europe, because that's what we would extend to any country that was undergoing such a threat at the moment. You know, we are people. This is a good, freedom-loving country, and should be treated no differently than any other country in a time of crisis.
So now.
And in addition to that, aside from what as far as Europeans are concerned, we need to do a better job of reinforcing the fact that this won't stop with Ukraine. That the rest of Europe, however this ends, and it's already happening. So you can't stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. This is happening now. However, whatever result happens it will affect you. So make a choice. Do you want that? That's the message I think we need to send to Europeans, and need to do it better. As far as the other side of the Atlantic is concerned, in America, we need to keep sending the message to Americans that likewise, we're not isolated. We'd like to think that our oceans will protect us. In the 21st century, our oceans will not protect us. We've already seen an information war campaign. We've seen infiltration into our body politic. We need to reinforce to, frankly, both Europeans and Americans that Russia is a malign actor, that that the fight the physical fight may be here, but if Moscow is to be victorious, it's going to screw everybody, and nobody can hide from it. It's like what's that recent movie that came out? Don't Look Up. You know, you can pretend that it's not happening, that it's isolated here in Ukraine, but I assure you it is not. Whether it's Brexit, whether it's Trump, whether it's infiltration into our economic systems, our civil societies, our political arenas, this can't be isolated. We're already well past that. So if you want to protect yourself, support Ukraine.
So that, yeah, we'll just pass it in. So I'd say, ask them, would you like to live in a country where journalists investigating the government are murdered? Would you like to live in a country where political opponents of the government are murdered? Would you like to live in a country where you'd be thrown in jail for actually telling the truth about something, to say that there's a war? And would you like to live in a country where the master occupiers commit atrocious war crimes, as they have in every place that Russia has occupied in Ukraine? And so if you wouldn't want to live in that kind of country yourself, would you want to condemn Ukrainians to living in that kind of a country and understanding not only will there be political oppression, but as we've seen in all the occupied territories, thousands of people actually murdered. And that's not a conjecture. That's a fact that's already happened. And do you want to run the risk of allowing Ukraine to be subjected to that so that you can be the next victim of that?
Oh, hold on, Sasha. You reply to the you were replying to the first question.
Yeah. I just as a Ukrainian, I just wanted to say that maybe, in my opinion, there is no best way to tell it, but for 100%, your way to tell this truth, it will be the best one, because as more sincere as you can be telling something from your own experience, it's it's easy to it's easy to feel someone's pain, emotions and everything if it's something sincere. If you're not just retelling news, political situation, all of this kind of shit. If you're telling from your own experience, from your heart, and just trying to, connect with the person, it always works best. And I agree with Steven, and it works every time, even not asking people if they want to live in Russia. You can ask a French person if he wants to live in Germany, or if you ask, English person if he wants to live in Italy, and so on and so forth. So why not? So, because great croissants in France, right? Beautiful warm sea in Italy, and why not? So why do you care how to call yourself, how to distinguish yourself? It doesn't matter. No, it matters to people, and they starting to understand why Ukrainians are standing for their country so hardly, and why it is important, and even with such obvious and simple examples.
Okay, yeah, Dima.
I want to hear the answer from Harry, because you've been volunteering here in Ukraine for almost 3 years, and you were asking for help from Western world. What's your message? And to compare 2022 and now, how it changed your messages? What you say to people?
Hey, I'm Harry from Estonia. I'm a volunteer in Ukraine since beginning of the war. Firstly, I want to answer your question as well. What could you, as Ukrainians, do more to get the message out to Westerners or Europeans? I think the matter is not you getting the message out. It's us, Westerners, who need to dig in deep and see how we can help Ukraine. I think that's where we're lacking. It's not you asking for help or trying to get the message out. It's people like us who are outside, who need to talk to our friends and convince them to support Ukraine. So I think it's nothing you can do. It's us trying to understand the impact this war in Ukraine has. And anyone listening, anyone who believes in freedom, if you believe in freedom, you should help Ukraine. That's as simple as it is. This is the biggest war since Second World War, and it's in our doorstep in Europe. And I apologize to you that our government ain't doing enough. So you Ukrainians do what you do. You're here under this aggression. You're surviving. Honestly, I will do from my part as much as I can. Everyone in this panel as well, and all the friends we know. But the people in my home in Estonia, they need to wake up as well. Because if Kyiv would have fallen, Russia would have been already in Estonia. And I know that Russia won't stop. And the only way to stop Russia is to keep supporting Ukraine, to keep delivering the weapons they need. They don't need boots on the ground. They don't need Estonian army here. They need the equipment to defeat Russia and stop them. And I apologize as Estonian that our governments haven't done enough.
Okay, yes.
I just wanted also to comment on that, because I guess we all that support Ukraine are trying to do our best in our countries to pass the message. But I think aside from the human part of helping Ukrainians and how evil the Russians are, all the bad things they do, I think there are just two facts that needs to be highlighted. One is the Russian Empire has been expanding forever. I mean, in their history, they have never stopped expanding. And it was under the Tsars, under the Soviets, they never stopped. And now it's under the Russian, whatever regime it is now. It's in their mentality, in their culture, they're expanding always. And the second fact is, in the last 2 years, Russia has converted its whole economy into a war economy. Their industry is now producing military goods. Their whole social system and education system is producing soldiers and getting soldiers recruited. That's something, once you have started and have gotten it on, you cannot stop it easily. I mean, if tomorrow Ukraine falls, it won't stop, because they cannot change the whole footing of the Russian society and the Russian economy of going from a war status to a peace status. They can't stop. And the only way to feed them is with war. And they will need another war. If Ukraine is finished, they will get to the next one. The Baltic countries, part of Finland, part of Poland, they just won't stop. I mean, Moldavia, Georgia, they will all fall. They cannot stop it if they want to. The only way to stop it is defeat them here, now. I think that's a message people need to understand in Europe. Either we defeat them now here, or it will be our war very soon.
Let's the whole panel clap the questioner. Very good. Peanuts in charge of security. I think of, listen, I'm 66, I'm too fucking old. So I'm not going to fight. But my kids, 35 and 30, a boy and a girl, a man and a woman, maybe they don't fight. But their kids, or maybe their friends who are 18, 19, 20, who are not in the army, in the British Army or the Royal Navy or the Royal Air Force, if we don't stop Russia here in Ukraine, are coming for us next, Estonia, somewhere else. And it does feel horribly like 1938. With Neville Chamberlain played by big chunks of Obama and Joe Biden and David Cameron and all the others. And the reason I'm saying this is not because they've said the right things. They have said the right things, Western leaders. But there is a big gap, to answer your question from before, there is a massive gap between Western rhetoric and Western delivery. Let's have a question from somebody who hasn't asked a question before. Are you? Yeah. Okay, Arthur. All right then. Who's in charge? You are. By the way, Dima is a wonderful, wonderful fixer, and you can see when we go places, one person's in it. By the way, excuse me. This is. Yeah, yes. This isn't the Kremlin because you'd be shot. Yes. Yes. If you haven't, by the way, one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my entire life is that Paul ran for the Frontline Club a safety course, and Ukrainians would come. And Paul's a very, very good combat medic, trained by the British Army, but years and years of experience, all the world's most terrible wars, and he's teaching Ukrainians safety in the combat zone. And then they Google him and they see that he rode or he climbed through a sewer for 4 miles to get into Homs, got blown up. His wonderful reporter and our great friend Marie Colvin was killed. He got blown up to bits. And then they got him out. He managed to say to the Free Syrian Army doctors, don't chop my legs off. I think I can make it. And they put him on a stretcher, and he gets out on a stretcher on a motorbike, which gets him out through the sewer again. He's picked up by a plane, and some kind of bloke from MI6 is on a plane, and he says, Hello, Paul. I heard it was all a bit fruity back there. But anyway, these Ukrainians are Googling Paul because they don't quite realize who he is. And they realize he's the guy who fucking climbed through a sewer for 4 miles, got blown up, and then came back again. And he's lecturing us about safety? Arthur.
What's the question?
You're replying to Dima's previous question.
No. I've got a new question to him.
You've got a new question? Oh, right, okay. By the way, who's moderating this? I am. In a democracy, by the way, this is something I absolutely believe in, and I think everybody, all those lovely people have now gone, but is anybody here a member of the Church of Scientology? Anyway, there's a wonderful American academic who wrote the first big book about brainwashing. And I've forgotten his name, but his name is Professor Robert something or other. Anyway, he said that the enemy of cults and actually also totalitarian thinking is tolerance of mockery and tolerance of humor, which is why I allow Gunnar Conroy to sit next to me. You've got a question.
Tolerance of cults.
No, tolerance of cunts. No. Tolerant. If you in a proper democracy, we tolerate. No, we don't just tolerate. We cherish humor. Are you speaking, Lisa? Okay, never mind. We cherish humor and we cherish mockery of power because that is the thing that divides us from the tyrants. And one of the other reasons I support Ukraine is right now, democracy and the democratic countries from around the world are in trouble, and the fascists, the tyrants, are doing rather too well for my own comfort. And in part, that's why we're all here, and in part, why we're doing this. What's your question for Arthur?
Yeah, question to Arthur as a former diplomat. Tell me, why people, when they are in charge or when they are top commanders in army or they make statements kind of neutral and we have to not escalate, blah, blah, blah. But when their cadence, when their time is over, then they make this big statement like our country should deliver like everything what we got. So why diplomats don't do it like when they have a time, when they have actually things to do it? And why do they play on Ukrainian feelings, on Ukrainian emotions?
Yeah, I get the easy questions. I mean, that's a really... Yes.
If you prefer, you can tickle Peanut's balls.
I don't think she has balls, but anyway.
As her mother, she does.
Right. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to address Dima's question. I think there is there's a lot of latency inside government and official organisations. So whether it's, as you say, top generals or ambassadors or foreign ministries, people are locked in a way of repeating what has been happening for the last 20, 25 years. So all the time, and it comes back to the Jake Sullivan sort of view of the world that rather than say we're in a different world now, and actually we have to recognize that we can no longer, for example, this endless escalation is this, or escalation management, which we've talked about a lot in the last couple of days. Everybody who, if you came to the Ukraine war and just analyzed that war and you didn't have all this history, it's very obvious. You can see that actually Putin backs down. If you raise the stakes, Putin retreats. But people, when? Well, I'll give you the big example is when the Russians tried to take Kyiv, failed, and pulled back. Well, I mean, there are loads of examples. Well, there you go. But I mean, but the point is, and literally every day of the week, we're told, whether it's in London, Washington, wherever, oh, you can't escalate because then Putin will nuke us. And it's, you know, as it's been said before, it's not a real fact, but it is constantly rolled out. So to try to answer your question, I think you have institutions that fix the way that people think, and it's a kind of groupthink problem. And then when people leave institutions, they become more critical and they examine, you know, these statements that they've been forcing themselves to say. But it's very, very, I agree with you, it's very unhelpful to Ukraine because you have this kind of contradiction. You know, you're given hope, but also this contradiction of someone who is saying, you know, I used to be a general and I think you guys should have F-16s 3 years ago, but you know that general wouldn't say it when he was in service. I think there's a bigger point here, which is actually, and it comes back to the answer to perhaps some of the earlier questions, which is we have to recognize that we in the West have everything to lose, and you know, and it's the question the gentleman who was here earlier that, you know, one answer to the question of how what's the best, most convincing argument to say to Westerners is, I think, it's just simply say, do you want to live in the world you live in? You know, because that's actually, because we don't seem to, in Britain, we don't seem to appreciate that having a secure border, having an expectation that your children and your grandchildren live in a similar way to you, not identical, but similar, taking things for granted. Now, of course, you're in a part of the world that you don't take it for granted, and wars have happened more than once in this country. You know, unfortunately, it's not the first time, of course, but for a lot of people in Western Europe, we've forgotten about these basic facts of kind of geopolitical life. So I think people need to be reminded. So if the things that you take as normal, you need to understand they're not normal, and you have to fight for them. And we've forgotten because we're too comfortable.
Good. Any more questions from? Because I've got an idea. Any more questions from the floor? Okay. So hold on. You've asked a lot of questions. So we should now ask members of the panel to ask a question of another member of the panel and play tag until we close in 15 minutes. So, Stephen Humphreys, have you got a question for a member of the panel?
Let me see. Who should I pick on?
By the way, and because this is a democracy, the more malicious and funny the questions, the better.
Well, that's the John Sweeney democracy.
I'm sorry. Vote for John Sweeney next time, please.
Yeah, I'll try to ask a respectful question. So, of Hari, because I'm very interested in the Estonian experience, and if you could talk more about, you know, what inspired you to come here to help Ukraine, and we've talked a lot about how to try to fix America and other countries, and what do you think is the situation in Estonia, and how can it be maybe an example for other countries of supporting, you know, the basic existence of a Western alliance that is not totalitarian dominated?
Lovely. We've got 10 minutes left, so let's everybody answer in 2 minutes. And at the end of your answer, Hari, you've got to ask another person on the panel a question, and every. Yeah. Well, listen, here we are. Question, answer it, and then ask another question.
Yeah, it's quite simple for me as Estonian. My grandparents or everyone during Second World War, everyone in Estonia knows someone who's been deported by Russians. We was 50 years under occupation. We heard these stories since we was children. I have a grandmother. She's 95 years old in Estonia.
By the way, here's the Harry's grandma.
And
she'll invite you to the next festival.
I hope she's gonna push it to 100. But when the war started, to see her facial expressions and how she felt about it, like she was reliving it, That's how most of us feel, the fear that the Russians will come back. And that's why I'm here, because I came here to do my part, so I wouldn't have to fight in Estonia to end this fight here, so Ukrainians wouldn't suffer, so Russians wouldn't advance, and it wouldn't reach out. Because it's in our DNA to fear that the war is going to come back, same as Ukrainians. For centuries we've been gone through genocide, deportations, rape, and same things. And it's our duty to our fellow neighbors who are living next to this tyrant, Russia, to support each other. And unfortunately, a lot of Estonians, we have 25% Russian population, and a lot of them are still pro-Russian. They're still pro-Kremlin. So 30 years living in European Union hasn't changed their views because of Russian propaganda. Only way to stop the propaganda and Russian Empire from their, illusions of expansion is to crush Russia here in Ukraine. Then, only then, all the Russians understand that this recreating empire was illusion, because they see already that they're second strongest army in Ukraine. So.
Good. Okay, so ask someone, Harry. Well done. Ask another member of the panel a question.
I want to ask Paul, right? Don't.
Okay, all right then. Here we go. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for Paul, because I know that you are now living in different frontline and non-frontline cities in Ukraine, and as a war journalist, my question is, with all the situation with Israel and Palestine and different other conflicts around the world, and literally attention that slippers out of Ukraine now, why you as a journalist not chasing those fresh news and situation, but choose to stick to Ukraine and to tell world what is going on in Ukraine?
A good question.
Yep, thanks for that. Yeah, I saw it when October the 7th happened. 2 days later, I couldn't call a friend in Kyiv, in Odessa, in Kramatorsk. They had gone. The world press has moved on. But I've been doing this for 25 years, and I kind of believe that a story, I don't leave a story half told. Like in Syria, everybody was evacuated out of Syria. It was considered just too dangerous to even go in. But we were on the story, so we went in, and it cost my colleague her life, and I was blown up. And it's the same with Ukraine. I came here, and I understand the battle. I knew the battle that Ukraine would face a year in advance, because I know how editors think. I know how the news cycle works. The news cycle, a story starts off, poof, as in when the full-scale invasion happened. It was the biggest story in town. News crews flooded to the country. And I was like, my clock was already ticking. I thought, it's going to take one big event, one big war, one big massacre, and all of these big, highly paid, really expensive news crews will be out of the country onto the next story, and I will find myself fighting to even get one story a week out. So I knew this, and the longer I spent in Ukraine, and the more I saw the absolute resilience of the people and their refusal in the face of quite overwhelming military force to back down and to go, no, we will not take this. Kyiv in 3 days, Kyiv in a week, Kyiv in 2 weeks. I wanted to see it through, and I firmly believe the Ukrainian people will see it through. And I wanted to. These stories die when people stop caring. That's the problem. These stories go away. I said earlier on in the conversation, or yesterday, it's our duty to report to the world what's happening. Maybe we can't always change what's happening. We try to. Marie died in Homs because we wanted to stop the Assad regime slaughtering civilians. We didn't stop it, but 10 years later, I was in court a few months ago testifying as to what we saw in Syria, and it's the same here. We may not stop it, but I think it's our duty to make sure the world will never, ever have the excuse of saying we didn't know what was happening.
Yeah. I just want to further what Paul said there, because like some of us here, you know, I'm an old war dog myself, and have been through a couple of conflicts. I've been coming here for nearly 30 years. So for me, it's personal. But secondly, I agree that the press corps has done a terrible job of covering this war. Abysmal. Right after October 7th, when they completely, and I with you, Paul, also had anticipated this. It's expensive to set up a whole new base of operations in a new conflict zone. In the Holy Land, they already have bureaus and cars and fixers and all that. So it's in some ways cheaper for them, and also in many ways it's you know, the flavor, it's the focus. The focus should never have shifted from here, and I'll just conclude with this, because from my perspective, this is the single most important war that I've ever covered in my life. The consequences of what happens here will shape the future of Europe, and by extension, the world, not least of which because of the transatlantic alliance. This is the most important conflict that I'll see in my lifetime, I suspect. It needs to be covered, and it's being shamefully underserviced by the International Press Corps. So that's at least one of the reasons why I'm here for it.
Thank you.
Listen, everybody on the panel hasn't spoken in the last 5 minutes. Your last thoughts?
My last thoughts.
No, you're not dying.
Yeah, your dying declaration is admissible in court, is not hearsay. But okay. Well, everybody's last thoughts. Well,
Anyway, no, it's the why are you here? Why aren't you somewhere else? Nice.
Well, I had the same experience. What Phil was just saying, that I felt like this was the most important thing happening in the world. I say that from the perspective of somebody who worked on the criminal investigations of the Russian election interference and all kinds of Russian fraud and collusion, not only with the Trump campaign, but with the Republican Party more broadly, that has really abysmally not been covered by the press at all. And that was the main thing that motivated me to come here.
I've already said why.
Yeah.
I live here.
Okay.
I don't have a choice, literally.
There are lots of. We're going to conclude on. I want to wrap up the whole thing. So, my father, Leonard Sweeney, was a ship's engineer in the Battle of Atlantic at the age of 19, 20, 21, and he fought fascism. And the idea that his son, despite all the terrible things, or not terrible, but not great things his son has done, the idea that I don't do my bit to try and tell the world that this peaceful democracy, it's got lots of flaws, tons of flaws, you all know them, but nevertheless, it's a democracy and it was at peace, was invaded by a fascist neighbor, and we didn't turn up, and we didn't help these people. That's wrong. And we're not doing enough at all, and we need to tell Vladimir Putin a simple message, and I think everybody's going to echo this. Vladimir Putin, do fuck off. So, once again, if you've been enjoying this, and everybody here has given up their time freely, which is beautiful and good. Obviously, this is a bit ramshackle. Obviously, this is a kind of war zone. Arthur Snell made his own way here from Blythe, just for the laughs. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you to every single person on this panel and all the other panels. Thank you very much to the audience. Let's give the audience a huge round of applause. Woo, 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 woo. And thank you for listening. And once again, if you can donate to our basket of charities, great. Do so. If you don't have the money, doesn't matter. Please write to your MP or your congressman. Please don't vote for fucking Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, you're invited to the next festival. But hopefully you won't be able to come. So thank you very much, and let's have a huge round of applause. Woo! Good, good. Thank you.